Welcome to the show discussing problems and issues of health with Dr. Alcena. For this segment of the show, I'm going to continue to talk about rheumatoid arthritis. The last couple of shows, I went over all the details about what rheumatoid arthritis is and so on and so forth. 1.3 million people in this country suffer from rheumatoid arthritis. Some 700,000 youngsters suffer from rheumatoid arthritis. Now I want to get into the detail to let you know how we treat rheumatoid arthritis. But before I do that, I want to set up the foundation to explain to you how the medication really works so that you really have a complete comprehension on really what happens when we prescribe this medication. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease, meaning that something happened to the body unknown to no one. We still can't figure it out. That causes the body to react against itself. That substance, that autoimmune process, is basically an antigen-like material process. And then the body in turn reacts by developing an antibody to it. So you have antigen-antibody complexes all over the body. Okay? An antigen is a substance that when the doctor give it to you, or by way of a flu shot, for instance, or any other vaccination, then the idea, you're going to develop antibody to it, and the antibody then is going to protect you. That's the idea. So, in autoimmune diseases, we don't know what happened to the body that causes to react against itself to produce this antigen-like process, which then the body develops an antibody against it because the body is fighting against it. Then you have an antigen-antibody complex sitting all over the place. Rheumatoid arthritis, in this case, can go in any organ, any part of the body, from the skin to the brain to the toe to God knows what. Now, once you have the antigen-antibody complexes in the body, they're sitting somewhere, by necessity, they must degrade. Once they degrade, they release then what's called substances that are called free radicals. The free radicals are really the thing that's causing the inflammation. And the inflammation is what causing the pain, the destructions of the organ and the joint, what have you. Wherever those complexes are located, eventually there's going to be severe destruction taking place. If it's a joint, if it's the heart, if it's the hematological system, it doesn't matter. If it's the liver, the spleen, what have you. Now that you understand what's going on, this is an antigen-antibody complexes. The body see that it's a foreign material. The body is reacting against it and releasing free radical. The free radical causes the inflammation, and then you sense it as a pain. You feel the pain. So therefore then, the treatments that I'm going to talk to you about, there are several categories of medication that we use. Let's take, for instance, the anti-inflammatory medication. The number one anti-inflammatory medication in the world that I use to treat rheumatoid arthritis happen to be aspirin. That's correct, aspirin. Because aspirin is cheap and you could find it all over the world. Most people in the developing world cannot afford something as simple as Motrin, something as simple as Advil, even though those are reasonably priced here, but in the developing world they're quite expensive, if they can get their hands on it at all. But aspirin is easy to get. So aspirin basically, you have aspirin, you have non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medication. I just mentioned them to you, which is basically Motrin, Advil, Aleve, etc., etc. Okay, and then you have the COX-2 medication. There's only one left in this country, of course, that's Celebrex. Okay, the whole idea is basically to attack the inflammation so that you could relieve the pain. But this medication do absolutely nothing to deal with the antigen-antibody complexes that I'm talking about, which is what's causing the disease in the first place. Those are good to relieve symptoms. We need them, but the disease process is still continuing. That's right. The inflammation is still being produced because The antigen antibody complexes are still there. Then there's another category of medication, which is steroid. Fantastic. Remember, I told you, steroid was developed by a Negro gentleman, Percy Julian, who faced major, intense discrimination in this country. They wouldn't allow him to go for his PhD. He had to go to Europe, to Scotland in particular, to get his PhD. And when he came back to this country, he did a whole lot of stuff, tremendous amount of stuff that are benefiting society to this day. But the best known one, of course, is the development of steroid. Okay. Now, steroid works via two mechanisms. Steroids is also a very powerful anti-inflammatory medication. But also, steroid is able to dislodge. This is very important to understand. The steroid works in rheumatoid arthritis to sort of subside the inflammation by actually dislodging the antigen antibody complexes. That's right. The steroid can fit itself in between those substances, dislodging them, thereby relieving the intensity of the inflammation, thereby relieving the pain. That's right. The steroid can do that, and does do that. So steroid is being used by physicians across the world to treat all sorts of conditions, thousands of different conditions. The field of modern ophthalmology wouldn't exist today without steroid, because just about all the eye drops the eye doctors will give you in order to use right after you had your surgery for your eye, or even when you're not having surgery, what have you, to try to subside the inflammatory process that's taking place that the surgery is causing, they have steroid, all these drops. You understand the importance? I mean, you can't believe the incredible importance of this medication, and yet it was developed by Dr. Percy Julian, who actually lived right here in Greenburgh in Westchester, and died, I think, when he was about 76 years old. If you want to read about Dr. Percy Julian, what he's done, go to the library, click on the New York Times. That wrote these pages of obituary about what this man had meant to the world and the things that he's done. Now, there's another category of medications that you see on television 24/7 throughout this country. All the biologics that you're seeing on television, Humira is one that I can mention. There are several others all over the place. And then you have methotrexate. Methotrexate is a chemotherapeutic agent that is used ordinarily to treat breast cancer, as well as both men and women, as well as childhood leukemia. That's correct. That's why methotrexate is used the most. You want to know, but how did methotrexate get involved in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis and a whole host of other conditions such as ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, psoriatic arthritis, and on and on and on and on. How did that ever happen? Well, if you bear with me, I'll give you a little story. When I was a young man, much younger than now, struggling and working in the factory, I decided to go and take a course in laboratory technology near Columbus Circle in Manhattan. There was a school there. One thing led to another. The important thing that I was so poor, I could not afford the $100 down payment to take the course. I didn't have the $100. So I went to a place that I will not name, a course from M.A.C.P. The place is still there. Okay, you could figure it out. There's a big clock there where they're selling watches as well. Right, they're still there, and I don't have to name it. You could check it out. I asked to to try ask the guy to lend me $100. I was taking home $2,300 after taxes. So the guy told me, frankly, I was not worth $100 in those words. So I shamefully walked out of there, went back to the school. What had happened was you have to take an entrance exam. Well, I got all the questions right. And the lady was very impressed, this Jewish lady who owned the school. There was another guy named Mr. Petro that was from Panama that was running the school for her. So when I went back, I told her, I don't have the $100. What should I do? Then she came back to me. She said, what? She's going to take me into the school without the $100, and I'll pay her when I start working after I graduate. You can't make this up. And they get into an argument, this lady and Mr. Petro, who was against her doing that. And then she came back. I heard them arguing in the back. She said, well, I F on this school. This brilliant young man is coming in, period. That's it. So she took me in without any money. And sure enough, I did very well. I finished first in the class. She sent me to Willowbrook Hospital in Staten Island to get the job. I was entitled to the first job. I got there. These people jerked around with me the whole day because in those days we didn't call people black or African American. I was a Negro, so they were not going to give me the job. Even though I had my green card, they tell me some ridiculous story that it was grant money, blah, 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 since I was not a citizen. But they waited until 4:30 p.m. to tell me that. Okay, I was there the whole bloody day. And I took, again, walk out of there shamefully. By the time I got there, the school was already closed. So I went back Monday morning. They sent me to Wyckoff Hospital to get a job. So I got the job at Wyckoff Hospital in Brooklyn, and I started working there. Then I started going to high school and college at the same time, struggling to get ahead. I was making very little money. So one thing led to another thing, that New York City decided, in its wisdom, that everybody working in the laboratory had to be licensed. To me, that was the saving grace. We had to be licensed. I hadn't had a high school diploma. I'm still in high school, going to high school, Washington Irving Evening High School, and going to Hunter College at the same time, back and forth, running from the high school to the college and back and forth. Sometimes I have courses there, courses the same. It was unbelievable, but I was determined to get an education. So the first exam I took was the technician exam. I just walked in without studying, blah, 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 blah. I took it, I passed it, so I got my technician license. That, believe it or not, gives me the right to take the technologist license. So, one thing led to another. There was a high school near 12th Avenue, way downtown, near the West Side Highway. That's where they were giving the exam. I can't remember the name. So every Saturday, I would walk in there and took an exam in hematology, took an exam in blood bank, take an exam in serology, take an exam in all of it without preparing. So as I sit with you right now, I have 7 or 8 such licenses on the wall in my office. So I pass all these things. So I was one of the few people in the city of New York who has the technology license, the supervisor license or whatever. So therefore, I was able to get a job at Brookdale Hospital to supervise an immunohematology laboratory. There were 3 technicians under me, plus there were 2 hematology fellows. My boss hired me so that I can help these 2 hematology fellows to set up the research project, which they were supposed to do 1 year of research and 1 year of clinical. So those guys had no interest in doing any research whatsoever. But that's what I was hired to teach them, the technique on how to use the laboratory technique to set up the research project. They couldn't care less. They were just beating the time to finish the program. However, my boss said, Val, you could do any research you want yourself. Set up your own project if you want to, because he was a bright man. He knew this guy was not doing anything, because every time he come in the lab, the guys were never there. So this is where methotrexate comes into the picture. Out of the blue, there was a counter that has dozens of flasks with powders in them. In those days, most stuff of this stuff were oil powdered. We didn't have all this liquid, fancy liquid stuff. You had to weigh the stuff, dilute it in saline, and blah, 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 if you wanted to use it to whatever you wanted to do with it, treat people or whatever. So out of the blue, I decided to set up a research. I won't bore you because it's very complicated. And I decided to take 24 control mice, 24 research mice, and then God said, pick up that yellow flash there. And that was basically methotrexate. And I took that methotrexate, I diluted it, and I was going to and I used that. However, to do that, I had to inject both groups of mice with something that can produce, that is like an antigen. And I come up on my own with some funny looking white chalky material, diluted that stuff, and injected both group of mice with it, 24-24, to their tail. Okay? All you have to do is warm up the tail, the vent popped up, and you inject them. Then I decided, again, this is all on my own, never done any research before. And I decided to give one group of them methotrexate, one I didn't. But I have the incubator that has 24 here, another incubator, 24 there. All from the top of my head. And then 7 to 10 days later, every day I look at the little octolony plates, which is little white jello stuff that you could see if something happened. Well, 7 to 10 days later, the group that I did not give methotrexate to start having the little yellow jello, start having a little arc, like the arc you see on the sky, like that, throughout the plate. That, my friend, was the production of an antibody, because I gave those mice that powdery stuff. The one that I give the methotrexate, all the plates remain empty to this day, empty. That means that the methotrexate block the production of antibody. I did that all on my own. Figure that out. And that is how, by the way, I got into medical school. When I explained to my boss, who was a very nice man, what I had done, he said to me, Val, this is a genius stuff. We got to get you into medical school. You are a genius. His word. Then I went back. Now the concept of medical school came into my mind. I never thought about medical school before. So I went back. Okay, so we're working on that project. I'm doing my thing. Then I went to Hunter College to try to join the pre-med program, because now I want to go to medical school. The guy who was running the pre-med program jerked around with me for a couple of weeks. He won't meet with me. Until one day I took a day off. I was determined to talk to him. I sat in front of his office. I will not leave there until I know he must be going to the bathroom sometime during the course of the morning. And sure enough, about 10, 11 o'clock, 11:30, I was there since 9 o'clock. I saw him, he's going to the men's room. And I follow him into the men's room. And I said, sir, what have I done to you? You don't want to talk to me. You don't want to meet with me. What's wrong? He says, well, the reason why I don't meet with you, Mr. Alcena, because you are not medical school material. Therefore, why should I take you into my pre-med program? Just like that. So I walked out. I went to the bursar's office, give $10. I asked for my grade. They gave me my grade, got into my car, and drove to Queens College, all the way to Casino Boulevard. I don't know why I did this. I had never heard of Queens College before, but I decided that's where I'm going to go. That same day, because I cannot take 2 days off. Went to Queens College, asked the guard, I come to meet or speak to the person in charge of pre-med. He says, that's the genetic building. That's where the person is. So I went there, got into a major argument with this lady who was a secretary, black lady. I had this big afro. You got to understand, I was 240 pounds weight of muscle, a big guy with a huge afro. And this lady tells me, you can't see the person because you didn't have an appointment. I said, are you kidding me? I drove all the way here to get into this argument. The guy overheard my voice arguing with her. He came out, he said, sir, I'm Dr. So-and-so. You want to meet with me? Come in. I come in. He said, sit down. I told him what had just happened at Hunter College, that I would like to join his pre-med program because I like to go to medical school. He says, you have your grade with you? I said, yes. I showed him the grade. He said, are you kidding me? With this grade, you have to understand, I was a straight A student. I'm on the dean list every semester. And this guy told me this. You got to be, I'm talking about heavy duty courses now. This is biology, heavy duty chemistry stuff. Uh, and I'm acing all that stuff. So this guy said, okay, you could come and join my group in September. I said, okay, thank you very much. Walked out, went back to work the next day, keep doing my thing. By the way, this experiment I did was at Brookdale Hospital in Brooklyn. Brookdale Hospital. And I went back. Now I want to go to medical school. Every single day, that's what we're talking about. I got to go to medical school. So one thing led to another. It was that doctor at Brookdale Hospital gave me this incredible recommendation letter. Never forget that. Wrote up this letter to get me to medical school. And the letter went to Harvard. The letter went to Einstein. And I went to Queens College, gave the guy over there a copy of the letter. And it was that gentleman at Queens College who packaged me. You can't make this up. Packaged me and sent me to Einstein. Said, Val, you don't have to wait. You don't have to graduate to get to medical school. You're a brilliant young man. We got to get into medical school. And sure enough, I went to Einstein. He sent me to, because he had a habit, apparently. I didn't even know that. Every year, 2 or 3 students from Queens College always get accepted at Einstein. I didn't know anything about that. So this particular year, I was one of the 2 or 3 that was going to be accepted. So I went there for the interview, brought all my research papers. It so happened that all the people that were interviewing me, they were all basic scientists. I went to the blackboard, explained everything to them, and my friend, I was accepted on the spot. I was accepted into medical school before I finished college. I went to medical school in 1969. I graduated college in 1970. Okay? I never attended my graduation because when my graduation was taking place in Madison, whatever you call it, I was in the biochemistry class. So that's how methotrexate get to be. Once the paper was published, methotrexate was tried in human, and it was shown that methotrexate was outstanding in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis and all rheumatological diseases and all other antigen antibody type diseases, including Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. So all the time that I was in medical school, competing like crazy, methotrexate was already in the market being used to treat rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, etc. And it was because of the significant toxicity that methotrexate has that those brilliant people went into the laboratory via DNA recombinant technique. They created all the biologic that you see today on television. Isn't that funny? Isn't that great that Dr. Julian was discriminated against, and yet he created steroid, a Negro, and me, a Negro man as well, did experiment with methotrexate. Now, all over the world, methotrexate is being used to treat all sorts of rheumatological problems, including diseases such as Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and so on and so forth. How about that? And now, all the biologic, I had nothing to do with them, but all of them were based on the experiment that I had done with methotrexate. That's how you see them on television every night. How about that? And I want you to know that was the very first experiment that I've ever done in my life. And since then, I've done dozens of other stuff that are helping hundreds of millions of people across the world. How about that? So all those people that thought that I was brilliant, I never let them down. I proved them correct, and I'm still proving them correct today. And I have the so-called Valiere Alcena syndrome, that I don't look like a doctor, I don't speak like a doctor, and yet I'm among top 1% physician in this country. I'm among 0.5% doctor across the world, and being rated by the powers to be in the state of New York as a giant in the field of medicine in the 20th and 21st century. And yet, I'm a poor little Haitian peasant, an orphan who went to elementary school at PS 44 in Manhattan when I was 26 years old. How about that? The fact that I finished the program, the 7-year program, in 2.5 months doesn't matter. I was still 26 years old. Okay, so methotrexate, therefore, works to treat rheumatoid arthritis also by dislodging the antigen-antibody complexes. The biologics do that the same way, and so doing, they decrease the inflammation, but they also prevent the process from getting worse by preventing the formation of new antigen-antibody complexes. That's how they're so much better in this sense than the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, and they're so much better as well than aspirin. But they're expensive, and those who cannot afford them wind up having to take aspirin across the world and NSAID, etc. So I will be continuing to tell you about the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis next week, so that I can give you the doses of the different medications and how we use them, etc. Until such time, keep watching the show. This is Dr. Alcena saying so long and bye-bye.